Hey folks, I hope you're all doing well. We are doing a reading or a series of readings on Darksydephil, also known, his real name is Phil Burnell. I'm going to take a look at his birth chart. Actually, I've gotten a bunch of notes. Something I noted, he was born in Bridgerton, was it Bridgerton or I think it was Bridgeport. Sorry, Bridgeport, Connecticut, on April 6th, 1982. And something I noted when I was looking up his stuff is that he was born in a blizzard, and I don't know why that stood out to me, apart from it kind of being foreshadowing for how he's going to be tempted to be throughout his lifetime. Someone who really, really struggles to change, who holds on to what has been passed down to him, even though he resents it. We're going to get into all of that later, but it is significant that he was born in a blizzard, okay? And by the way, everything that I talk about in this video is allegedly for entertainment purposes only. We are taking a look at tarot cards and Lenormand cards. Basically, we are looking at patterns and pictures and cards, and humans love those kinds of things. If you can read a painting, if you can read a sculpture, then you can read tarot cards, okay? That's basically what we're doing here. So take everything with a grain of salt, okay? So I also need to talk about how if there are positive aspects in a person's birth chart, they can be muted if a person just chooses to make bad choices over and over and over, and consistently tamps down any kind of change, avoids any kind of indication from the universe that they should change. I seem to remember Phil at one point saying, "I don't change unless I'm punished." And it's not very often that he's punished. Apparently, that's not going to come through until later on in life. So before I get too far into his birth chart, I should note that I don't have the time that he was born. I just have his location and his birth date. So what I'm talking about here is going to be kind of limited compared to what I would have if I had the time that he was born. So I noted, has a lot of fire and a lot of air and water energy, but I noticed that he has next to no earth energy, and that to me gives a sensation of someone who is not very grounded, who might struggle a bit with handling resources in life, and that just means like doing stuff around the house. He's going to need help. Handling finances, he's going to need help there. If he had the wherewithal to hire a wealth manager, that would be best for somebody like Phil. But we'll get more into his finances later. But it's like I'm getting from Spirit that in his case, he doesn't have the earth energy, so money just kind of slips through his fingers, right? He doesn't accumulate cash because it's not in his birth chart to do so. It's written in his stars. Okay, it's written in his planets and his mathematical points, which we call nodes and objects and that kind of thing. I want to talk about his sun in Aries. So this is where he is impatient. This is where he burns through everything, projects, relationships with everybody. That's like personal relationships, that's business partnerships. He burns through everything. He has starter energy, but he doesn't have the ability to see a project through to the end. He needs people around him to get him there. You kind of like expect through the sign of Aries. That's a fiery energy, definitely. It burns through stuff quickly, but because he doesn't have that earth energy to ground stuff, not really. He has it in one place, and we'll talk about that in just a second. He doesn't have that much grounding energy, so he just kind of stays in an area for a little bit, and then he moves on when it doesn't pan out, when it's not successful in his eyes. And if you hear a bunch of traffic, I apologize. It is rush hour where I am in Texas, okay? That is his sun in Aries. Got some starter energy, and that's good. And we see him every once in a while that he does have that starter energy. But is he able to see it through without help? No. He needs people around him to keep things going because he doesn't have that grounding energy within himself to do that. The one place in his birth, the one planet in his birth chart where there is earth energy is his moon in Virgo. And in this case, I wrote down in my notes, Wolverine toy. This is where he demands that everything go his way exactly, perfectly. That's kind of Virgo in its worst possible state. Virgo is great at being an accountant, at being great at records, being an office manager. They are excellent at keeping extremely detailed records, and they're careful about making sure things go their way. Unfortunately, it can turn upside down, and in his case, even as a kid, that was already present and I don't feel like his parents did much corralling of this, demanding that everything go his way. And so that's quite kind of why he talks about this Wolverine toy when he's 40 years old, right? And why he had kind of made a big deal about it when a viewer sent him one. Excuse me. He's never gotten over. It's like a primal wound that he's just fundamentally never gotten over because it's his moon in Virgo. Now, I gotta say, his moon in Virgo is kind of subverted, if you will, because he tamps this part of himself down so hard. He does not want any part to do with his emotions. He does everything he can to suppress them. Something specifically in his birth chart is that he is terrified of showing what he perceives to be his dark sides, which is ironic. He's Darksydephil. You know what I'm saying? And it is a tendency within a moon in Virgo anyway to suppress normal, healthy emotions. But with him, it seems to come naturally because this moon in Virgo for him is subverted because he refuses to work on this. He can revert it, if you will, back to the normal state if he chooses to work on himself. But is he going to make that choice? Spirit doesn't seem to be looking forward to that day. I doubt that it's coming. I'm just saying, okay? Another interesting aspect in his birth chart is his Mercury in Aries. And again, we come back to that Aries energy. He's got Sun and Mercury in Aries, and I believe he's got Sagittarius, more fire energy in another part of his chart. With Mercury in Aries, this is him constantly needing new experiences and moving quickly through everything, like Sun in Aries. There's no grounding energy, so there's no reason to stay in one place. There's he doesn't need a fire. I want you to think about fire when it goes through grass, like dry grass that's been dry for a while, versus fire in a fireplace. He is that grass burning. He is that grass fire. He is not the fire in the fireplace, which ideally he should be. But unfortunately, it feels like some of his birth chart, there are positive aspects in here, but a lot of his birth chart doesn't favor him. I'd suspect that his solipsism, his focus on himself, his self-centeredness, really doesn't help this. It seems to really exacerbate this particular birth chart here. When I'm talking about constantly needing new experiences, I'm drawing my attention back to WWE. A while back, when I was reading into Phil before this video, kind of doing spiritual research into him, so to speak, I downloaded the WWE app just to satisfy my curiosity. Why is he so obsessed with this? Why do people spend so much money on this one app, right? And when I downloaded the app, I spent maybe 30 minutes at the most with it because I was utterly overwhelmed with all the buttons to press and all the notifications and all the sparkle and all the glitz and bells and whistles. It may be that I'm just an old fogey, kind of like Phil, right? On the other hand, I can see how all that kind of casino lights, bells, whistles, colors, flashing things like that can really attract somebody who needs new experiences like Phil. I can see how someone with their Mercury in Aries would tend towards having a gambling habit like Phil does, for instance. So that's something to keep in mind here. We're going to move into his relationship aspect, and this video is going to cover his relationship specifically with Kat. But his Venus is in Pisces in his birth chart. He has issues with boundaries between romantic partners. He needs them to provide all emotional, sexual needs. He needs complete support from them. But when this sign is subverted like he has subverted his moon in Virgo. So he's not in touch with his emotions. So he can't flow very well when he's in his Venus in Pisces. So he doesn't give back hardly at all. And what he does is meager at best. So he demands everything of his romantic sexual partners, but gives nothing back in return because Venus in Pisces and Moon in Virgo are both subverted because he refuses to deal with them. A person with Venus in Pisces already has to struggle with boundary issues with their romantic side, but they also need to struggle with, and Phil struggles with, being unrealistic and idealistic with his romantic and sexual partners. He idealizes them very easily at the beginning. It's easy for him to wear rose-colored glasses to the point that it's almost blind. Like I'm getting from Spirit that it blinds him. Like they're not like he doesn't just like see the world through a filter. He doesn't see at heart. Like it's very opaque through these. Like it's a very deep filter. Interesting. So it's like not even rose-colored. It's like very nearly opaque rose-colored glasses. Very interesting. Okay. So, and I was just thinking that might be connecting something back to his mom. Like he loves and idealizes his mom, but resents her presence too. Like he needs his parents' money. He needs them as backup. When stuff goes wrong, he goes to them for backup, even though he hates being around them. And that is actually in his birth chart too. I'm going to get into that. Something else he has to deal with is his Jupiter and Scorpio. I see this as one of the major aspects that he is constantly dealing with because he's not dealing with the other aspects that he needs to be dealing with, like his emotions, like his spiritual and his philosophical side. When I read over his birth chart, he is supposed to be a spiritual, philosophical person. He's supposed to be in touch with all of that, but he isn't. And it's a tragedy. It's a waste of a lifetime. So far, I would love to see him turn stuff around. We will look at that later on in this reading. His Jupiter in Scorpio says he will be forever limited by things he considers irresistible. And that's his gambling habit. That's his need to be constantly edified by people outside of he needs external validation, basically, constantly and forever, but he resents the fact that he needs this. He hasn't dealt with his emotional aspects, and so he can't deal with how much he needs external validation. He doesn't want to deal with his dark side. He's not that Darksydephil, but he needs to, because this Jupiter in Scorpio makes him suffer. He doesn't know why he's limited. Also, he is forever limited by money, and that also comes back down to his lack of earth energy. He doesn't know why it slips through his fingers. He hates it. That's why he needs, if he were in a better position as a person, that's why he needs an earth sign to balance him out, and that might be who Kat and Leanna have been in the past. They may have been like a Taurus, a Virgo, or a Capricorn, for instance, or there was a powerful enough aspect of that in their chart, and that would have been a good balance. But because he's all about out of balance, the relationship was all out of balance, and so he suffers and doesn't understand why he suffers. It's a vicious Ouroboros of fuckery, basically. Folks, I have notes for days. Let me continue. Something else I noticed is that he had several placements in Libra. He has his Saturn in Libra. He may always struggle with realizing, let's see, what I say? Restrictions. I sometimes can't read in my own handwriting. He may always struggle with the restrictions that come with balancing the needs and wants of the collective versus his needs and wants. And we see that play out every single day with his audience. There will be some audience members who say, some people aren't in a position to donate right now. And he will push back so hard because, he needs the money. It's about him. And this is part of that solipsism, part of his refusing to deal with his dark nature, with his shadow aspect, his moon in Virgo. He cannot deal with the fact that it's not about him all the time. And that comes also from just being a deeply self-centered individual. His Uranus is in Sagittarius. This is a positive aspect which he suppresses through not taking action, through not self-actualizing his spiritual and philosophical sides, through his emotional sides. He doesn't take care of any of those aspects of himself. He should have great spiritual and intellectual growth. He should be fighting, ironically enough, against xenophobia and racism, as well as other inequalities. This is how you know how deeply fucked up of an individual he is. This is the kind of person who could have said, do you see how I screwed up as a younger person? He could be this individual today, but he isn't. He continues to be a problematic individual when it comes to minority communities, still to this day. And I'm sure past the point of this recording, there will still be issues. I'm getting from Spirit that he's going to be banned from other platforms. He's going to be banned from YouTube in the future for something that he says repeatedly. It's going to be stuff that stacks up over a long period of time. And eventually YouTube will say, you're giving us too much bad press. You're presenting bad customer service. And actually, that's why Twitch let him go. We can get into that later. But Twitch let him go because they're moving more to a customer service model, and a lot of people are going to leave Twitch voluntarily because Amazon wants Twitch to go to a customer service-y kind of model. But they got rid of Darksydephil, and they got rid of a couple of other people alongside Darksydephil because he was just bad press. He's just bad for business. Well, he's not going to change his habits because he doesn't see anything wrong with what he does. I've heard him say that he doesn't change unless he's punished, and I've seen that he doesn't change even when punished. He thinks he does. He pays lip service to doing so, but I'm seeing that Spirit is saying that YouTube is going to let him go in the future. 2 to 3 years, max. Okay. So, moving on to Pluto in Libra. This is where he has turbulence in relationships until he can mature by relating to and connecting to people. And he's going to struggle for the rest of his life with this. And this would be a struggle anyway. Like a person with their Pluto in Libra would constantly need to be checking in with their spirit guides, their ancestors, and with their person, with the people and their family members, their friends, to make sure that they're the best person they possibly can be. But Phil cannot do that. Phil cannot take criticism, and he is stung to the max when people like John Rambo leave him. John Rambo will always be his one that got away. I'm not saying necessarily romantic as a romantic partner, but John Rambo is his friend that got away. We'll talk more about that in just a second. He's going to have turbulence in relationships until he can mature by relating to and connecting to other people. This is where we get into his objects. These are mathematical points between planets. His North Node is in Cancer, and this is conflict between himself and literally every single aspect of his life. Family, friends, job, fans, YouTube, like Twitch, Streamlabs, car, shopping, Burger King, whoever. He has conflict between himself and all aspects of his life. He has an exaggerated ambition, and you can see that. Like, it's ambition it's hollow. It's naked ambition. It's plain. He just asks for tips every 30 minutes to an hour, even more frequently in some cases. But he says that's just business. That is part of this. North Node in Cancer. Here we come to the need for external validation. This is another place where it shows up. In order to defeat all these negative aspects, he must find a way to develop inner peace. Okay? And into the third set of notes, y'all. You wouldn't believe how much is in, he's a deeply dark individual. Spirit sees how much of his shadow aspect needs work on. He needs to work on. Spirit does not like him. I'll be plain spoken. When we talk more about his objects in his birth chart, he has his Lilith in Sagittarius, another fire sign. He rejects social norms. He is both an atheist and obsessed with himself to the point of being fanatical. He is obsessed with himself as being above everyone else. This is where a lot of people get that sensation that he has a cult-like gathering around his fans. That is where that sensation comes from with his Lilith in Sagittarius. That is not a mistake. And y'all, we need to talk about, last and not least, his Chiron in Taurus. This Chiron in Taurus is an object. It's not a physical planet or a star. However, this is where his lack of privacy and being a public figure and having to deal with his dark side publicly comes from. He may have grown up with a male authority figure like his dad, putting him down all the time. He might lose all of his family's inheritance or his family's properties due to gambling or other spending habits. This is where he cannot have privacy or any part of his life. He was born, I wrote in my notes that he was born to be a famous lol cow. It was in his birth chart at the time that he was born. He was born to be someone that people would see as a pariah, not as a paragon. Also, no amount of wealth or possessions will ever heal this Chiron, though he will try until he realizes that he can't. And I don't know that he will ever realize that this is something that he cannot do. So, folks, I have a couple of questions that I want to pose to our cards here. I have the Renaissance Tarot over here. I'll do a Celtic cross with that in just a second. We'll use these in a bit to see what Phil can do to start to turn things around, in spite of what we've discussed today. First, I want to get into a 9-card Lenormand spread. We call this a portrait spread. I want to know how his internet career is going to end. Okay. Retirement, not sexuality. This is a white lily, not a red one. It looks like he's going to chase other projects just off the top. Oh, okay. Conflict is going to force him to chase other projects in the future. Yeah. Basically, nobody on the internet is going to want this guy. Yeah. He has established conflict for himself. He has enrolled himself in the School of Hard Knocks for the rest of his life, dude. He is never going to graduate from this school. He is never going to leave. Let me put that more in the center. That's the influence going forward right there, man. Dude. He's always going to be wondering why, right up here. He's always going to be wondering why it works out like this. Like, what did I do wrong? He's always going to be saying, everybody treats me badly and I don't know why. He's so blind. I'm getting with this dog that he's just kind of chasing his tail. Because, well, I mean, in this kind of sense, the dog can never be facing outward. But I'm seeing in this case that he's just kind of like, it's a permanent cycle. Something's going to be exposed about his private life. Kind of like we were talking about his Chiron and Taurus. Something's going to be exposed. And this is the point, folks, where I need to talk about his private life. We can talk in detail more, but I saw in spring and in summer that he was getting divorced from Kat. When he was talking about legal stuff earlier this summer, I kind of had a sensation. And let me just say that a year ago, I saw that things were falling apart from them. When I did a reading about what was actually going on, I saw that things were falling apart. And then I saw in like spring and summer, things weren't doing well. In fact, that they were ending. So I see that going on here. It may be that there are other things that he is hiding behind the scenes about his personal life, not just his divorce, but also about his sexuality as well. People have speculated about his bisexuality. I sense that he is romantically and sexually attracted to men and romantically attracted to women, but not as much sexually. He has pretty low libido when it comes to women, but it's socially acceptable to be attracted to women. It's more socially acceptable to be attracted to women, I should say. Heteronormativity says it's expected. That's what you do. It's the default setting, if you will. And he has not challenged that. I've noticed that he grew up in a Catholic school. Some of that may have something to do with some of his, he may be holding over some beliefs from that era that he doesn't realize, because he hasn't done that spiritual and philosophical digging that much. But there's constantly going to be stuff coming out because he doesn't deal with stuff. He thinks he's hiding it, but everyone sees that he isn't. So it's the worst kept secrets possible, but he cannot stand his work. He absolutely resents stuff coming out about him constantly. I'm looking at this right here. Constantly, forever chasing success. And it evades him. The sun sets away from him. He wants establishment. Establishment, I mean, when it comes to specifically family. This lands on the house of the tree, which is about putting down roots. And you could say that, in his moon in Virgo, that is a need for stability. He cannot have it because he will not deal with his emotional aspects, with his spiritual, his philosophical aspects. He will not deal with them. And so this forever evades him. He wants to be a family person so badly. He gets a lot of good feelings from being known as a family person, which is why you hear him say, my wife, my wife, my wife, my wife family, my wife, my family, all the time. Even as of this filming, he's been divorced now for several months. He needs that image. It's a safety blanket for him. As long as people don't know that all this dark stuff underneath him is happening, then he doesn't have to deal with it. And he does his best, like with the incident, right? When he was filming himself masturbating. He cannot deal with it. When he says that Kat cries, and as of this filming, that's something that he says constantly, Kat is nowhere near. Like, she's not been near the situation in a long time, but he does. Because he's so embarrassed, he's so ashamed. There's something that he was masturbating to that he would die if it got out. He's masturbating to men. Okay, he was masturbating to men together with women who are trans. Interesting. Look at this. This is the risk and reward that he constantly takes. This is about doing everything he can to put down roots that he feels good about. But it's like rolling a stone up a hill. And here, it's because he forever has conflict. He's gambling. Literally, this is about gambling and also taking bad risks constantly when it comes to creating fights. And this is something people expose him all day for this. People expose him for what he does behind the scenes. People talk about what he does publicly. They make compilations about the things that he says. People enjoy highlighting how fucked up Darksydephil, Phil Burnell, is. He cannot get away from it. He resents it. Let's move on to this Celtic cross about the state of his relationship with Kat, because I can talk about the reading that I did a few months back, but it's a different matter altogether to have stuff on camera. This is the Renaissance Tarot, and it's often used, I often use it with more sexual aspects of life. I often use this with the LGBT community. Oh, I wondered if this card wasn't going to come out. Well, that's his base point. And there's his Three of Cups. That's crossing him. So he pursues an empress forever, because that's what the three is about. Comes back down to the empress and about sexuality and creativity and a little bit of chaos, because you're creating so much wonderful stuff. It's about imagination. It's about being completely in touch with your emotions and intuition. And here, this is his problem. It's his Ace of Cups here. The cup is empty. Normally it's overflowing, but this cup is empty. This one's overflowing. Kat, the one who I believe has left him, and I know that we don't have any solid evidence at this point, she's full and flowing. She's got relationships. But I see here that he's got his cup empty because he himself is empty. So something was very powerful in the past. That's a need to wrestle down a sexuality. That's a need to wrestle down fears about who a person really, really is. He is wrestling down his fears. He continues to do so. That is an influence that is here in the past and continues to rage well into the future. This is a battle that has never ended for Phil. This is the Knight of Coins, or the Knight of Pentacles, and it's in reverse here. Completely at a standstill, no movement forward whatsoever. I don't believe that he's ever going to marry again. I don't know that he's ever going to be in a relationship again. This particular falling out with Kat really, really shook his confidence. He's completely embarrassed by what happened. She said some stuff about his sexuality, that he would die if he knew got out. Leanna already let some stuff out. You can, Spirit says, Spirit says that I can talk about Leanna saying that he couldn't get it up with her. And I'm hearing that he's going to struggle to get it up with women, period. He can get off, but it's going to be in scenarios that he finds deeply, deeply sexy, which he is suppressing with all of his might. It's the Knight of Wands. Conflict, defensiveness, isolation. That's the Hermit. He cannot get out of his state of isolation because his cup is empty. It's like he sits inside of his glass box and is perfectly happy to see the world go by and do its thing, but resents at the same time, is so defensive. That's where the conflict is. He hates being there so much. He resents people having fun. That's why he tweeted that thing about the game room. Now that I've gotten to a certain point in life, I've realized I don't need childish toys. When he dies, he can't, I've said that a couple times, he crumples up inside when he thinks about the stuff that he wants that he cannot have, or he thinks that he can't have. That's his Chiron and Taurus coming through. He wants all this stuff, but he's just a bottomless pit. When it comes to money, he doesn't know how to save. It's not in his birth chart. This is the Queen of Swords, and she is in reverse. This is his aspect. This is someone who has so thoroughly locked away their cup of emotions that they don't have access to it anymore. They use their intellect, what intellect they have left, because Spirit will drain intelligence from a person if they don't use it the way that the universe wants them to. They don't think new things. They don't get creative with how they solve problems. They never grow. They never change. They don't acquire new habits. And remember, Phil said, I don't change unless I'm punished. He can't access his emotions anymore. That's the Two of Swords in reverse. A choice has already been made. He needs to know a choice has already been made when it comes to, things being stopped. He's not moving forward When it comes to being this ultra unbalanced person in this relationship, he would have been the kind of person just take and take and take without giving anything back, like we saw in his birth chart. He would have been really, really vicious. When they got into fights, he would have been absolutely cutting. I'm wondering if they didn't have, Key and Kat didn't have one more explosive fight before she said, I've had enough, and she just like packed a bag and just never came back. Like she asked him to like set her stuff outside the apartment or whatever, the condo, and like she never saw him again. Like she never was one of those closure people who needed to like have sex one more time to close things out. She was never that kind of person. They had one more explosive fight. He said something that she cannot get over, that she resents, has a grudge over to this day. Both Leanna and Kat are risks to exposing this particular struggle. The relationship fell apart because he didn't think of them as people. He literally sees them there as shams, as like smoke screens to like say, I'm a normal person of society, I'm not gay. And he thinks of it that way. He doesn't think of bisexual necessarily. Hold on, my battery's running low. But crisis averted. Anyway, basically, he doesn't see himself as bisexual. He either sees gay or straight when, unfortunately, like, he's just an old-fashioned kind of individual. There are points when he, like, launches into, like, fight mode when he has, like, actual interactions with people and he gets into, like, kind of, like, verbal fight mode. He resorts to, like, just, like, old people boomer insults, you know? He doesn't, like we were saying, he doesn't acquire new thoughts, new habits very easily at all. He doesn't like to. He doesn't see a need to, basically. So, this is judgment. In this case, it shows up as the angel. So these are his external circumstances. Basically, that was his last chance. He failed. He made the wrong choice, and now he has to deal with the consequences of his choices. I have here the Knight of Cups as his hopes and his fears. And folks, it is a Knight of Cups. Very muscular looking, and so is his horse. He would love to offer his cup of love to somebody else at this point. But he is deeply afraid of doing so. He would love to offer, like, very, very subconsciously. I don't feel like he's that consciously aware of his feelings towards men. I don't believe that he thinks of himself in those contexts at all. I think that it's very abstract under the surface for him. So that's where that deep fear, that moon in Virgo, kind of comes to the surface here. He would love a man to come into his life on a very, very deep, fundamental, subconscious level that he really, really struggles to talk about. Last and not least, we have the Hermit once again. We had kind of hermity energy earlier, and I see that coming through now. Over here with 9. He made the wrong choice, and now he's going to be put in a place where he needs to think about what happened. When I say he made the wrong choice, he shouldn't have married Kat. He shouldn't have been in a relationship with her. He should have dealt with his own personal issues first. He got into Kat because his relationship with Leanna fell apart, and he was upset about that. He needed his sham first and foremost. He continues to wear that wedding ring because It's just a thin veil for him that he feels protects him. As long as he cannot fathom why this is happening to him, he's going to stay in this hermit mode. I don't see him getting into another relationship, even though he really wants to be in one at a very, very primal level that he can't touch. So Spirit says to shuffle a little bit more. Let's see what we get. Let me see. Let me put it on top. That's the Five of Cups in reverse. That's regrets. Regrets about how he spent his money. He can't stop thinking about how much he regrets about it, and he can't stop pouring. Look at all this water energy, by the way. He can't stop regretting this. And he desperately, desperately wants a connection with somebody. He is all about the glory days, dude. He'll tell you all the time. He's one of those people who talks about how great they were in high school and can't stop talking about it. He has such regrets about how he spent his youth, basically, about how he spent his teens, his 20s. His 30s even. But he can't move on. This is such a childish aspect, too. This is the Six of Cups, which is in the Rider-Waite-Smith is the little boy and the little girl together. And this is another childish card, too. He can't reflect. We have the Knight of Coins in reverse here, but he's always going to be stuck at mission 1, like Keemstar said. It's showing up even here in his tarot cards. Things were so good in the past. He can't get over it. And you know what? To be fair, I'm biased. I also was born in the 80s. I remember how awesome the 90s were. The 90s and 80s were pretty fun. Not saying they were better. There were still awful things about that era. But he's like pathologically nostalgic, if that makes any sense. Okay, Spirit is saying wind it up. Let's do a few cards from the Uncertain Oracle over here on my left. That is the Rainbow Aura card. Set of cards, I should say. Let's get into it. We are wondering if he wants to turn things around. What's the first step that he can take today? What would that be? It may not show up on camera, but that says solstice. So that's going to be either a high point or a low point of his life. It could be like a time of year, but I'm getting more when he's at his lowest point. What can he do? Merge with small magic. He needs to come back to, I hate to make it sound all hippy-dippy and all that good stuff. He needs to come back to nature, in a sense. Touching grass is part of this. Getting away from the internet could be one of the best things in his low point that could happen to him. So I'm getting that retirement from the internet's going to be occurring inside the next 5 years or so at the most. And that it's going to force him to really, really reevaluate why everything fell apart. It's going to be a major point, a major low point in his life. Excuse me. Kind of like a winter solstice, if you will. It's going to be a major point in his life where he's going to have to choose to use the lessons that he's learned or not over the past 45-ish years or so. And if he's going to choose to use all that fire and water energy that he's got inside of himself to bring about something new with somebody else, with a team of people, because we saw that he's got starter energy, but he's not able to keep something going without help. Spirit says that she doesn't know that he's ever going to be a nice or even a good person, but there is that potential if for some reason he really starts to tap into that philosophical, intellectual, and spiritual side of himself that is in his birth chart, stops ignoring it and works with it instead. And that his leaving the internet permanently could be one of the best things that has happened to him. Spirit says that is enough on Darksydephil / Phil Burnell. I hope you folks have a great day.